um, this can itself be a point of dispute. I sometimes think that there's a sort of separating conceptual and cultural barrier between people who have the notion that there can be lawful ways to handle uncertainty, and people to whom all uncertainty is a chaotic anything goes.
Right. All right, but now, but you're still, I mean, you've certainly gotten into the bias and uncertainty picture here, and writing at the overcomingbias.blog. How much has this factored into the development of friendly AI? Because I know that is something that has been a passion of yours for many years now. And that's what you most likely are still you're a research fellow for the Singularity Institute. So anticipating that some part of this rationality, the Bayesian reasoning and uncertainty, is going into friendly, the development, or at least the theory of friendly AI. How do you tie that together?
Well, it doesn't tie together in quite the way you're thinking. The cognitive psychology of heuristics and biases, the systematic experimental study of human error, where error is defined relative to probability theory, well, that was certainly one of the sources of inspiration for my Bayesian enlightenment. But the kind of probability theory that they use in cognitive psychology, kind of probability theory that they talk about there, is simple, relatively very simple compared to the kind of probability theory that's used in artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the level of probability theory that would actually be required for AI. So it's not that you're directly picking up this probability theory and using it in AI for a number of reasons, one of which is that pure, raw probability theory generally gives you the brute force solution to something that would take longer than the age of the universe to compute. And the other one is that it's generally not all that complicated. If it were that simple, we'd have AI by now.
You're right.
So the purpose of overcoming bias is a bit different.
Oh, okay.
Sophisticated mathematical talent is something that the existing academic system is already set up to cultivate. We have lots of deep mathematicians in the world.
Sure.
But there's more subtle understandings of what you're trying to do, in AI particularly, that the existing system is not set up to cultivate, that is not systematically understood. So overcoming bias doesn't look directly like the kind of deep math that will surely be needed to build friendly AI, but that's because it's there to fill in the gap.
A missing gap.
The hope is that the work on overcoming bias collectively forms something that someone can read when they're 15 years old and then go on to study deep math, particularly, logic and probability and decision theory and other things that look relevant to AI, existing machine learning and so on, and come out 7 years later as someone who can apply their own math talent to the problem of friendly AI without just sort of instantly falling into any number of standard traps, like trying to invent modal logics to describe things that you don't understand, or having sort of anthropomorphic, human-like descriptions of how an AI is supposed to work and treating that as your intended design. It's not so much a question of how fast you pedal as where do you steer the bike.
But when you first started, would you consider yourself as having some of that anthropomorphic bias when you first started back, say, 2000, 2001, and you first started talking?
I started in 1996 or 1998, depending on how you count exactly.
Sure, I'm just saying that's first when I first came aware of your involvement, and when you were hanging out at the Institute for a while. So that's just my time frame. But yeah, 96, 97 is when you first started out kind of on this path, is what you're saying. And at that point, you would say that you had some of those biases that now you hope to eradicate as you move forward with friendly AI.
It's not a question of like the standard heuristics and biases. I mean, some of those were at work, but only at a very high level. I would adopt theories that were too complicated, and in cases where every step of the theory was another potential point of failure, and I might not have done that if I'd known and understood about the conjunction fallacy, which is the human tendency to not penalize complicated theories enough, one might say.
Okay.
So I might have done that differently if I'd known about the cognitive psychology experiments where you take two groups of analysts and you ask one group, what's the probability of a complete breakdown in diplomatic relations between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in 1983. This experiment was conducted in 1982.
Okay.
And you ask another group, what's the probability of a Russian invasion of Poland leading to a complete breakdown of diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Soviet Union sometime in 1983. And the second group responds with higher probabilities for the strictly more complicated event that was included in the first event. So that's an instance of the conjunction.
Conjunction. Okay, yeah.
And that's an example of, if I'd known that when I was 16 years old, I might have been more reluctant to construct complicated theories, or maybe I wouldn't have been. It's hard to look back in retrospect. But it took me a few years to find my legs in AI. That's assuming I found them now. But
well, it's hard to say, in such an expanding and unknown field. Or I mean, well, friendly AI, I would say.
But there's a Three Stooges episode I saw quite some time ago, in which Curly complains, "I'm trying to think, but nothing happens." And that's pretty much what happens when you try to think about AI.
Yeah.
It appears that something is happening, but it's not. It's not like, you make some progress and then you start to slow down, and it's not just a question of doing more of what you were doing before. It's not a question of throwing money at the problem or just hiring some prestigious researchers. It's more like a problem of, I'm trying to build AI, but nothing happens.
Yes.
Although I should specify here that we're talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, real intelligence. There's been plenty of progress in domain-specific machine learning, limited AI, narrow AI, domain-specific AI.
Sure.
So it's actually more of a problem of, I'm trying to build AGI, but nothing happens.
Yeah, and since you just we kind of organically went now started talking about AI, I just want to get your impression on it's kind of a debate in some AGI circles that I've read of between intentionally creating friendly AI, or let's say even AGI. Let's keep it a little more simple. Intentionally creating AGI, say Novamente style or Singularity Institute style. There's many groups out there working on it. Or in natural evolution of AGI through the interconnected nature of humans and the internet, the system that's being built, the global communication.
That second one is horse manure.
The second one is what?
Horse manure. Not going to happen.
It's not going to. The organic evolution of AGI is not going to happen. You say that seemingly with some certainty, and how would you come at that conclusion?
Back when life was not well understood, there was a notion that if you got some dirty shirts and straw, they would spontaneously generate mice. And as Pat Cadigan put it originally, that's pretty much what we're talking about here, that the spontaneous evolution of AI and the massively interconnected internet is sort of like talking about dirty shirts and straw spontaneously generating mice. It's just, intelligence, it has to be too highly organized for it to happen that way at anything but extreme improbability levels.
Well,
It would nearly certainly happen first as the result of someone in a lab who actually had some idea of what they wanted, exerting their human intelligence to make things come out that way.
okay.
Evolution, I should note, is ridiculously slow.
It is very slow, but it did produce some sort of intelligence anyway, if you define humans as intelligence.